Hope you're all doing well. Today I'm going to show you guys how I would go about setting up a Parkway Drive inspired tone with a 7-string for heavy metal inside your Axe effects. As far as I'm aware, Parkway Drive actually use 6-string guitars tuned down to B, drop B, but I'm going to demo with a 7-string today so that we can get down nice and low because I don't have a 6-string tuned down that low. If you do want to play along and you also want to try to get down nice and low but you don't have a 7-string guitar, simply grab yourself your 6-string guitar and load up the virtual capo and drop it down to the appropriate tuning. So to show you that quickly what I'm talking about, you want to load up the pitch block, and in this one you want to pick the virtual capo. So here it is, just standard tuning. Then simply adjust this guy right there. I haven't played my 7-string in quite a while and I forgot how different it feels to jump onto one of these because the fretboard is bigger and it's longer. So to jump back on that 6-string for a second then, it was like playing a little ukulele. To kick things off, I'm just going to show you the 4 different scenes that I've set up. Scene 1 is just a standard rhythm tone. Sounds great. It's not too saturated. There's a lot of low end still, but it's not too flubby. It's nice and tight, and I like that. The second scene is the lead tone. Scene 3 is a nice clean tone. And scene 4 is a real light crunch channel with a little bit of reverb on it just to give it a bit of something for those sections where you need it. Today I'm going to walk you through the rhythm patch and show you what I've done to get it dialed in the way I have it. I have made this patch available in my website. There is a link in the description. I have also put together a full step-by-step PDF walkthrough of how to build this tone yourself if you're into that kind of thing. It's very detailed. It tells you what's within each block, what blocks you're going to need, how to fine-tune and tweak it for your own personal settings. It's all in the link down below. All right, let's get into this walkthrough. So let's start from the beginning. First off, I'm going to turn everything off. So all we have is our amp and our cab. Amp model is going to be the PVH 6160 block lead because Parkway Drive used the 5150. At least they definitely did. I don't know if they still do, but that's where I've come from with this preset. So this is the settings I've ended up with. Pretty low gain for a metal tone. Now I'll explain why in just a moment. The bass is at 4, the mid's 3.95. I find I don't like too much mid in my metal tones. A little bit of boosted treble, not too much because I don't want it to be too fizzy. Presence halfway for the exact same reason. Depth at 3 and the bright switch is on. Now the amp and the cab on their own just sound like this. So there's still quite a bit of gain there and there's no boost on that just yet. So if I do push the gain up a little, okay, but as soon as you start pushing the gain, it starts to get a bit woofy in the low end. So in this situation, less is definitely more. Sounds counterintuitive, but the lower the gain, the tighter the sound. Still gonna sound pretty heavy, especially once you get in your band setting or you start jamming along with your favorite tracks. Now, I've not used the T8 mod. I did put it in here to test it, but I've not used the boost on the amp block. I decided to go with the drive block instead, which I'll get to in just a moment. And all I changed in the end is I cut the input EQ just a little bit on the low end. This is quite a low tuned guitar and I wanted to clean up the input just a little bit there. Output EQ, I did nothing because I've got a graphic EQ at the end, which I decided to use instead of this. And that's about all I've done on the amp block. And I think it sounds pretty darn good. Cab block, you've got two options. Well, you've got about 4,000 options, but in terms of using a 5150 or 6160 in Axe-Fx world, I've decided to stick with the impulse responses here, which are two 4x12 PVH 6160. So it's the matched cabinets for said amplifier. And there's a second one here, which is a mix. So on its own, this one sounds like this. This one. So this second cab, being a mix, sounds like there's a lot more room in it and it is a bit lower in the sort of the tonality. So I've brought that back in at essentially minus 9 dB because it just, this on its own is a bit too bright. And I didn't like it, but together, together, I think it sounds quite good at that level. The other option is you can use the Dynacabs because we've got a 4x12 5153, which again, play on words or play on numbers, but essentially it's a 5150 and I've decided to use a condenser and a dynamic microphone. Now, usually I like the Dynacabs, but today I've decided that I'm going to prefer the impulse responses because that's what my brain said earlier. Condenser and a dynamic, and the dynamic mic has just been blended back in a little. The condenser on its own, I've moved the mic position out of the way, so it's going to sound a bit more roomy. And the dynamic mic always, to me, sounds a bit too fizzy on its own. And that's the end result. So it comes down to your preference, of course. If you're going to try the Dynacabs, just try altering the mic position and you're going to get a different tone altogether. Now, before we move any further, you want to check your input gate. I'm not using this really too hard because I'm using a gate later on, which I think tightens things up a little bit better for a good rhythm tone, especially for metal. So it's working a little bit, but not too much. Let's move to the drive block. I've decided to go with the Tube Screamer T808 mod. Drive is right down, tone up a little bit, add a little bit of clarity and brightness, and the level's up there at 8. As we all know, or at least most of us do know, and you should know by now, a Tube Screamer is going to tighten the low end. So even though I've cleaned up the input on the amp block, this is going to tighten things up again a little bit more. because we're pushing into the front of a distorted amp, we're going to get a bit more saturation, a bit more compression, and it's going to smooth things out, and it's going to sound more metal. How's that go? Is it like that? Something like that, I think. Cool. I forgot one thing on the cab block. What I did in the preamp section here is I've put a low cut up to 80 and a high cut at 8,000 hertz there. Cleans the low end because you don't need all of that low, messy frequency. It's going to get in the way. And 8,000 because the top end gets fizzy and it's yuck. I will just say though, if you're just jamming at home, I oftentimes don't even bother with a low cut because I do tend to find that I like the low end in the room. When I get on stage and I'm performing, I try to clean up a bit more because on stage, different environment. Whereas when I'm at home, I kind of want to replicate having a real cabinet right next to me. Even though I'm using studio monitors, I want to get some low end and some oomph. And I find I enjoy playing a lot more when I've got that low rumble in the speakers. Might not be the best mix, essentially, but end of the day, I feel better playing it with that there. So that, again, just a little tip. That's what I like. Maybe you might like that too. And the room level, I brought up to 12% just to give it a little bit of room feel to it. It does tend to get quite dry. We could have done this and replicated it using the reverb, but I chose to use the room level here, which these days is actually pretty good in Fractal world. Next thing in line is the multi-band compressor. All I'm doing for this one is focusing on the low end. And it's grabbing onto those palm mutes when they come in. I've got the crossover at 150, so I'm picking the low end again to squish it. When you palm mute, a lot of push comes in that low end. So grab it using the multi-bed compressor and control it again. The chorus there, that's used on the clean tone because I like a chorus. Now this is where I've brought the gate in. Now this is pretty grabby. Without, with, so you want to try to play with that. Get your threshold so that you're not cutting off your guitar tone, obviously. Attack time, like to be pretty quick because when I stop, I want it to grab on and I want the gate to close to stop any sound coming through. Hold time, I've turned that right down so that it doesn't hold the gate shut, and the release time at 3 milliseconds. I find that around this sort of sits pretty well for me and for this specific guitar. So that's where I've ended up for this one. I did a low cut and a high cut. I want the gate to be avoiding the low rumble and the high fizziness. I want it to focus mainly on what's happening with the guitar. And I think it sounds quite good. Next in line is the Parametric EQ. Like I said, I chose to go with this instead of using the amp output EQ because I've got a bit more control in terms of fine tuning. If I need to, I can boost some extra stuff for a wider band there, but I didn't need to. I liked how it ended up. So this is it without. And now with. Without again. Just gives it a more overall polished sound to it and a feel to it as well. You don't have those horrible frequencies getting in the way and making the sound feel unprocessed. And in this situation, I kind of want it to feel processed, if you know what I mean. I've gone 110. Now, you don't have to necessarily go as high. Same as I was saying before, you can bring it down a bit lower to keep that low end rumble, but let's leave it at 100 for the moment. Just here, I've increased a little bit of peak attack. Not much, just the tiniest little bit of fizziness, let's call it, at 1800 there. Now on its own, that sounded disgusting, but that's because it was on its own. I was really boosting that. Just helps the guitar bite a little bit more. Here at 800, I decided to remove, because it sounds a bit woofy, a bit sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Honky. Sounds a bit honky in the mid region there. Which is gross. So I went -3, I think. I find with these kind of EQ moves, you don't want to do too much or it starts to sound not good. You are removing too much frequency and it sounds, yeah, just not like a guitar. Sounds wrong. And at 4,000, I've really notched that, made it quite peaky and brought that down. And essentially that's the hiss that I'm trying to remove. You don't necessarily notice it until you hear it and then you remove it. Sounds a lot nicer. So there we go. That is how I go about getting a nice 7-string metal tone, very much Parkway Drive inspired sound there. If you played along, I hope it's sounding as good at home for you as it is for me right now. Like I said, this patch is available on the website and you do have that PDF in as well, which is, like I said, very detailed, very thorough, and it's a really cool walkthrough. It's a lot of fun to build as well and gives you some cool ideas for future builds of your own. And I reckon that'll do it for today. Thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned. See you next time.